He had not smiled in 1100 days. Not once. Not at a joke, not at a sunset, not even at his own reflection in the elevator glass on the 61st floor. And on the night this story really begins, a 3-year-old girl in cartoon pajamas was about to walk into his study and do something no therapist, no doctor, and no amount of money had managed to do in 3 years. My name doesn't matter much here. I'm just the one telling you what happened in that house on the hill outside Seattle, because I watched most of it unfold with my own eyes. What matters is Marcus Whitfield, 36 years old, founder of Whitfield Dynamics, a logistics and freight empire that moved cargo across 4 continents. He had a private jet parked at Boeing Field, a mansion with 11 bedrooms he never used, and a bank account with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. None of it meant anything to him anymore. 3 years earlier, on a wet October evening, his wife Camille and their unborn son had been killed when a delivery truck ran a red light on 4th Avenue. Marcus had been on a call with a shareholder when it happened. He never forgave himself for that, and he never really came back from it either. His employees noticed. They talked about it quietly by the coffee machine, how he used to laugh in meetings, how now he just stared at spreadsheets like they owed him something. His board members noticed too. In the clipped, careful way executives notice things they're worried will hurt the stock price. Even his mother noticed, and she'd leave after every visit dabbing at her eyes in the driveway, because her son's face had gone somewhere she couldn't follow. Marcus lived in that enormous house with only 2 other regular presences in it. His housekeeper, Elena Reyes, and her daughter, Lily, who was 3 years old and had never once, in all her short life, met a stranger she didn't immediately try to befriend. Elena had lost her husband young and worked long hours to keep a roof over Lily's head. Marcus had hired her about a year before this story starts, if he was honest with himself, which he rarely was these days. He'd hired her more out of some buried instinct to have life in the house again than out of any real need for a housekeeper. He would never have admitted that to anyone, least of all himself. Every morning at 6, Elena arrived with Lily in tow because there was no one else to watch her. For a long time, Marcus barely registered the girl. He'd walk past her in the hallway with his eyes locked on his phone, his mind chewing through numbers and calendar invites and grief in that order. But Lily noticed him. She noticed everything about him. The way his shoulders sat too high, like he was bracing for something. The way his eyes never quite focused on anything in the room. The way he didn't laugh even when the kitchen TV played something genuinely funny. "Mama," she asked one evening, tugging on the hem of Elena's apron, "how come Mr. Marcus never smiles?" Elena crouched down to her level, the way she always did for the important conversations. "Some people are carrying something heavy inside, Mija. We have to be gentle with them." Lily nodded with the gravity only a 3-year-old can summon when she's decided something is now her responsibility. And from that evening on, making Mr. Marcus' smile became her personal, deeply serious project. She tried everything her small arsenal allowed. She drew him pictures, suns with too many rays, flowers taller than the houses beside them, and left them stacked on the corner of his desk where he'd have to see them. She sang to him in the hallway, off-key and completely unembarrassed, songs she'd half-invented herself. She even brought him her favorite stuffed rabbit one afternoon, informing him solemnly that he needed it more than she did. Marcus would nod, maybe rest a hand briefly on her head and keep walking. Whatever door his heart had shut itself behind, it wasn't opening for crayon suns or off-key songs. Not yet. Elena started to worry not about herself, but about what this was doing to her daughter. She saw the way Lily's face fell, just slightly, every time nothing landed. I mean Lily, honey," she said one night, catching herself, tucking the blanket up around her daughter's chin. "Not everyone smiles right away. Some hearts need more time than others." "But Mama," Lily murmured, already halfway to sleep, "his heart looks so tired, I just want to help it rest." Elena's eyes stung. Out of the mouths of babes, she thought. Her 3-year-old understood grief better than most of the adults she knew. If you're new here, this is the part where I tell you it gets worse before it gets better. And it does, in ways none of them saw coming. So stay with me, because what happens next in that rain-soaked study changes the whole shape of this story. Marcus's world, meanwhile, kept tightening. A rival conglomerate called the Sorensen Group had begun quietly buying up shares of Whitfield Dynamics, positioning itself for what his lawyers delicately called a change in leadership structure, and what Marcus more honestly called a hostile takeover. His health was fraying under the stress. He wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating on any real schedule, and every time he closed his eyes he saw Camille's face. Heard her laugh like a radio station he couldn't quite tune into anymore. One Tuesday evening, with rain hammering the windows of the study like it had a grudge against the glass, everything came down at once. His biggest client, a decade-long account worth hundreds of jobs, pulled its contract without warning. Marcus sat alone at his desk long after the call ended, and for the first time since the funeral, he let himself break completely. His shoulders shook. His breath came in ragged pulls. He put his face in his hands and cried the way a man cries when he's been holding a dam back with his bare hands for 3 straight years. He didn't hear the small footsteps in the hallway. He didn't see the tiny figure in pink pajamas standing in the doorway, watching him with wide, worried eyes. Lily had woken from a nightmare and gone looking for her mother, and instead found the loneliest sound in the world, a grown man crying alone in the dark. She didn't run for Alina. She didn't cry out. She walked slowly across the thick carpet, her bare feet silent, and stopped beside the enormous mahogany desk. Looking up at the billionaire who could buy almost anything on earth, except the one thing he actually wanted. Marcus felt her there before he saw her. He looked up, face wet, mortified to be caught like this by anyone, let alone a 3-year-old. He wiped his sleeve across his cheeks, too late to hide it. "Lily," he said, voice cracked and rough. "You should be asleep. Where's your mom?" She ignored the question entirely. Instead, she reached out one small hand and set it gently on his knee. "Mister." "Marcus," she said, "why are you crying?" He opened his mouth to give her some grown-up deflection about work and deadlines. The kind of lie adults hand children to keep the real weather out of the room. But something about the seriousness in her small face made the lie die before it reached his tongue. "I miss someone," he finally said. "Someone I loved more than anything." Lily considered this the way she considered everything important, with her whole 3-year-old body. "Is she in heaven?" He nodded because he couldn't speak. "My daddy's in heaven too," she said, matter of fact as weather. "Mama says he watches me from the stars." "Maybe somebody's watching you too." The plainness of it hit him harder than 3 years of therapy language ever had. He'd sat through careful, clinical conversations about stages and processing and coping mechanisms. None of it had touched him the way this child's honesty did, standing there in her pink pajamas at 11 at night. That's when Alina burst in, having found Lily's bed empty. "Lily, I'm so sorry, mister." "Whitfield she must have. It's all right, Alina," Marcus said, still stunned. "She was keeping me company." Alina looked between her daughter and her employer, sensing something had shifted in the room without being able to name it. "Come on, Mija." "Bed," Lily shook her head, arms crossed with 3-year-old finality. "Mr. Marcus is sad, Mama. I don't want to leave him by himself." Alina opened her mouth to insist, but Marcus surprised them both. "Please," he said quietly. "Let her stay a little longer if that's all right with you." And so, in a turn none of them expected, the exhausted billionaire, the worried mother, and the stubborn toddler sat together in that study, while the rain kept tapping the glass. And Lily climbed onto the couch beside him and narrated her entire day in broken toddler grammar, the caterpillar she'd found by the mailbox, the way her mama made the best rice in the whole world. A full and unbroken account of a preschool snack time dispute over goldfish crackers. Marcus found himself actually listening, really listening, for what felt like the first time in 3 years. There was something in her voice, untouched by adult sorrow, that landed on him like sunlight breaking through whether he'd assumed was permanent. That night marked a small but real shift in the house on the hill. Marcus started coming home earlier, just to catch Lily in the garden before dark. He kept a drawer of small toys in his study for when she wandered in. He learned the names of her favorite cartoon characters, so he'd have something to ask her at dinner on the rare evenings Alina let her stay up a little later. Alina noticed the change too, and it filled her with a hope she was almost afraid to feel. "You've been good for him," she told Lily one night. "I don't know how you did it, but you did." Lily just shrugged, the universal toddler gesture for why do adults make everything so complicated. I just wanted him to be happy. Everybody should be happy. One Saturday, on something close to an impulse, Marcus asked Alina if he could take her and Lily to dinner at a small Italian place near Pike Place. The kind with checkered tablecloths and a owner who remembered regulars by name. Alina hesitated. It felt strange, crossing whatever invisible line separated employer from something else. But Lily had already answered for both of them, cheering so loudly that a waiter 2 tables over turned to look. At the restaurant, Lily insisted on ordering the biggest noodle on the menu, which turned out to be a plate of pappardelle nearly as wide as her face, and spent half the meal narrating an elaborate story about a dragon who was secretly afraid of thunder. Marcus found himself laughing twice in one evening, which was, at that point, something of a personal record. Alina watched him across the table, this man who used to walk past her in silence with his eyes glued to his phone, now wiping marinara off a 3-year-old's chin with a cloth napkin like he'd been doing it for years. "You're different lately," Alina said quietly once Lily had gotten distracted by the restaurant's fish tank. "I know," Marcus admitted. "I don't fully understand it. It's like someone cracked a window in a room I forgot had windows." "Don't thank me," Alina said, smiling faintly. "Thank the one currently trying to feed breadsticks to a goldfish." He looked over, and sure enough, Lily was crouched by the tank, solemnly offering a piece of breadstick to a very unimpressed betta fish. Marcus laughed again, a third time, an actual record now, and something in his chest loosened another half-inch. That dinner became a small, unspoken tradition. Once a week, sometimes twice, the three of them would end up somewhere, the Italian place, a diner near the water. Once even a food truck rally downtown where Lily declared herself the boss of tacos, and handed out unsolicited ratings to strangers in line. It was ordinary, it was small, and for a man who'd spent 3 years convinced that ordinary, small things were closed to him forever, it meant more than any of them said out loud. Real happiness, though, doesn't arrive on schedule, and it definitely wasn't finished testing Marcus yet. 2 weeks later, the Sorensen Group's quiet share-buying campaign crossed a threshold, and Marcus's grip on the company he and Camille had built from a single leased warehouse was suddenly, seriously in danger. The stress sent him to the hospital with heart palpitations severe enough that his doctors used the word attack more than once. He lay there hooked to monitors, entirely alone, while his lawyers argued in the hallway about strategy as if the man in the bed were a line item. For the first time since Camille's death, Marcus Whitfield felt completely and totally defeated. And it was in that quiet hospital room that Alina made a decision that would change everything. One Marcus never saw coming from his quiet, hardworking housekeeper. If you've ever had someone show up for you at the exact moment you'd stopped expecting anyone to, you already know how much this next part is about to matter. Alina had watched Marcus's decline over those 2 weeks with growing alarm, the hollow look creeping back into his eyes. The small progress, with Lily seeming to unravel under the weight of the boardroom crisis. When she heard he'd been rushed to the hospital, she didn't hesitate. She called her sister to watch Lily for the evening, except Lily, upon learning where her mother was going, produced the kind of tantrum only a determined 3-year-old can generate, absolutely refusing to be left behind. "I want to see Mr. Marcus," she insisted, tears streaking her round cheeks. "He needs me, Mama." Against her better judgment, Alina brought her along, thinking a short visit might lift the mood in that sterile room even briefly. What Alina didn't know was that this simple decision was about to unearth a secret she'd been carrying quietly for over a year, a secret that tied her family to Marcus in a way none of them could have imagined. At the hospital, Marcus's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Renata, tried to turn them away at the door. "Mr. Whitfield isn't seeing visitors. Doctor's orders." But Lily, small and utterly undeterred, slipped past Renata's legs before anyone could react and shoved the door open. Marcus, pale against the white sheets, looked up in surprise as the tiny girl clambered into the visitor's chair, clutching a crumpled drawing she'd made in the car. "Mr. Marcus," she announced, holding it up like a trophy. "I made you a picture. It's you and me and Mama." Everybody's smiling. He stared at the crayon drawing, three stick figures with wide, gap-toothed grins, standing under a yellow sun the size of a beach ball. Something in his chest tightened, not with the pain the doctors were monitoring, but with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Real warmth. "Lily," Elena scolded gently, hurrying in behind her. "You can't just run into someone's hospital room like that." "It's fine, truly," Marcus said, managing a thin but genuine smile as he held the drawing carefully. Like it was made of something fragile. "This is exactly the medicine I needed." As Alina settled Lily into the chair, still red-faced with embarrassment, Marcus noticed something on Alina's wrist, a thin silver bracelet, half hidden under her sleeve. It struck him as strangely, uncomfortably familiar. "Elena," he said slowly, "can I ask where that bracelet came from?" Her hand went instinctively to cover it. "It was a gift. From my husband before he passed." "What was his name?" Marcus asked, an odd feeling settling over him like cold water. She hesitated, catching something shift in his tone. Daniel Vasquez. He worked construction. He was on one of your company's warehouse builds out near Kent about 4 years ago. There was an accident on site. He never came home." The blood left Marcus's face. He remembered that accident. He remembered the name specifically, because he had personally signed off on the settlement paperwork. Paperwork his legal team had assured him was fair and generous. Paperwork he had never once followed up on himself, trusting the lawyers to handle what he'd let himself think of only as the human cost line item. "Elena," he said, his voice barely above the beeping of the monitors, "I am so sorry. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know Lily was his daughter." Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice held steady. "I never wanted you to know, Mr. Whitfield. I needed the job. I needed to take care of Lily. I didn't want pity, and I definitely didn't want you feeling guilty every time you looked at us." The weight of it crashed over him. The little girl who'd cracked his frozen heart open with crayon suns and off-key songs, the child whose laughter had started stitching him back together, was the daughter of a man who had died because of a mistake on one of his own construction sites. A mistake his company had closed out with a check and a signature, nothing more. He looked down at Lily, already asleep in the chair, one hand still curled around the drawing of 3 smiling stick figures, completely unaware of the storm rearranging itself around her. In that moment, Marcus understood, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic, that this family hadn't landed in his house by accident. Not really. Marcus didn't sleep that night, doctor's orders be damned. His mind kept circling back through every piece of paperwork he'd signed without reading closely, every condolence letter he'd handed off to PR instead of writing himself, every way he'd let his own grief excuse him from noticing anyone else's. The next morning, against medical advice, he called his general counsel and demanded every file connected to Daniel Vasquez's death. He read every page himself this time. No delegating, no distance. What he found made him sick. The settlement, while technically compliant with company policy, had been calculated using outdated safety inspection reports that quietly minimized the company's liability. Elena had been given far less than she and Lily deserved, not illegally exactly, but not honestly either. He also learned something that broke his heart open a second time. In the months after Daniel's death, Elena had applied to dozens of jobs and been turned away, again and again, for lacking recent work history. She'd been weeks from losing her apartment when she saw a housekeeper listing for the very same company responsible for her husband's death, though she hadn't made that connection at the time. She'd taken the job out of pure necessity, never imagining the man signing her paychecks was the same man who'd signed off on her husband's case. When Elena arrived at the mansion the next morning, unsure what to expect after her confession, she found Marcus already dressed and waiting in the living room. Fresh out of the hospital, against every doctor's recommendation. "Elena," he said, standing as she walked in with Lily's small hand in hers, "I need to make this right. Not just because of guilt, though I do feel it, but because it's simply the right thing to do and it's years overdue." He laid it out plainly, a corrected settlement he would personally guarantee. An education trust for Lily that would follow her all the way through university, and something that surprised even him as it left his mouth. "I want you and Lily to move into the guest wing, not as staff, as my guests for as long as you need. And Alina, if you've ever wanted to go back to school, I'll cover it. Whatever field you want. Alina stood frozen, overwhelmed. Mr. Whitfield, I can't accept that. It feels like it's not charity, he said gently, cutting her off before the word could land. And it's not pity either. Lily gave me something I thought I'd lost for good, the ability to feel things again. Let me give your family something back. Please. Tears slid down Alina's face as she watched Lily across the room, already absorbed in examining a crystal vase on the coffee table with the fearless curiosity only a toddler owns. Daniel would have wanted this, she whispered. He always said good things happen when good people cross paths. But this new chapter wasn't arriving without one more storm to weather first. The Sorensen takeover was entering its final stretch, with the board scheduled to vote in 3 days on whether to remove Marcus from the company. His late wife had helped him build out of a single leased warehouse. His lawyers didn't sugarcoat it. The numbers weren't in his favor. 3 years of grief-driven absence had eroded the board's confidence in him as anything more than a liability wearing a nice suit. 2 nights before the vote, Renata found him still in his office long after the building had emptied out. The city lights spread out below the window like something spilled and glittering. She set a folder of talking points on his desk, then didn't leave right away. "Can I say something not as your assistant?" she asked. He waved a hand, too tired to do more. "I've worked for you for 6 years, she said. "I watched you disappear after Camille died. I mean that kindly. I watched a person just leave the room while his body kept showing up. The last few weeks you've been coming back. I don't know what changed, but whatever it is, don't let this vote convince you it wasn't real." Marcus didn't answer for a long moment. Outside, a ferry crossed the black water of the Sound, its lights small and steady. "Thank you, Renata," he finally said. "I mean that." She nodded once, businesslike again, and left him alone with the folder and the window and the city. The night before the vote itself, Marcus sat alone in his study, staring at the same crayon drawing, now framed and sitting front and center on his desk. He thought seriously for the first time about just letting the company go, walking away, disappearing somewhere quiet, far from boardrooms and shareholder calls. It was Lily once again who changed the direction of everything, though this time not with words, with something far harder to argue with. The morning of the vote, Marcus prepared to leave for what might be his final walk into Whitfield Dynamics headquarters as CEO. Dressed in his sharpest suit, jaw set, he made his way toward the front door when music stopped him cold in the hallway. He looked into the living room. Lily stood in the middle of the rug in her favorite yellow dress, spinning in wobbly circles to a song blasting from Alina's phone. Her feet stomped, her arms windmilled over her head, and her giggles filled the entire room with the kind of pure, unfiltered joy that has no idea it's rare. "Mr. Marcus," she called the second she spotted him, "dance with me. Come on, dance with me before you go." He hesitated, glancing at his watch, painfully aware of the clock counting down to the most important meeting of his career. "Lily, sweetheart, I really don't have." She ran at him anyway, grabbing both his hands and hauling with everything her small body had. "Please, just one dance." For good luck. Something about the sheer confidence in that request, her complete conviction that a single dance could fix anything, broke through the last wall standing in his chest. He set his briefcase down, he loosened his tie a half-inch, and he let her pull him into the middle of the living room. For the first time in over 3 years, Marcus Whitfield danced. He spun her around, lifted her onto his shoulders, and let out a sound he hadn't made in what felt like a different lifetime. He laughed, a real, full, unguarded laugh that seemed to shake something loose from deep in his chest. Alina stood in the doorway, eyes wet, watching the two of them twirl in the gold morning light spilling through the windows. Quietly, without either of them noticing, she pulled out her phone and recorded the whole thing. Marcus arrived at the board meeting late, tie slightly crooked, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. When the board opened with their case for his removal, citing his emotional absence, his declining engagement, he did something nobody in that room expected. He stood, walked to the head of the table, and spoke without notes. "You're right," he said, looking each of them in the eye in turn. "I've been absent. I've been lost in my own grief for 3 years, and I let this company carry that weight without me. But I'm here to tell you I'm back. Not the man who built this company alongside my late wife." A better one, a man who just got taught by the most unlikely teacher imaginable that healing is possible. That joy comes back, even after the worst kind of loss. And that leadership means actually showing up for the people who depend on you, every one of them, not just the ones on this floor. He laid out new worker safety reforms. Inspired by lessons he wished to God he'd learned sooner. He described a renewed vision for the company that had nothing to do with quarterly optics and everything to do with what the company owed the people who built it. By the time he finished, several board members who'd walked in ready to vote him out found themselves nodding instead. When the vote finally came, it went his way. He kept the company. But more than that, he kept something worth far more than a title, his own capacity to feel joy again. That evening, back on the terrace overlooking the garden, Marcus sat beside Elena, watching Lily chase fireflies across the lawn, her laughter carrying up into the darkening sky. "You know," he said quietly, "no therapist, no medication, no amount of money ever touched the grief I was carrying. But one dance with a 3-year-old cracked, something open that I thought was sealed for good." Elena smiled, watching her daughter's small silhouette weave between the glowing lights. "Lily always says everybody should be happy. She just means it more than most of us ever managed to." Months later, the video Elena had quietly recorded, a billionaire and a toddler dancing barefoot in the morning light, found its way onto social media after a family friend shared it. And it reached people far beyond that hillside house. Strangers all over the country left comments about how one small, unscripted dance had done something that nothing else could. Proof that sometimes the smallest hands hold the most power to mend what everyone else had already given up on fixing. So that's the story. If you'd been in Marcus's shoes that rainy night in the study, do you think you'd have let a 3-year-old stay? And if you were Elena, would you have told him the truth about that bracelet or kept it buried? Let me know where you're watching this from tonight. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. If this one got you, hit like, subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment below. I read every single one.